Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to this webinar on the 2016 Global Review. My name is Laura Scott and I work as a consultant for Sustainable Public Procurement team in Paris at UN Environment. Before we start, I would like to give you a brief introduction to the GoToWebinar tool. All attendees are on listen-only mode throughout the webinar. If throughout the webinar you have any remark or any question, you can write your questions in the question box and we will read them during the question and answer session at the end of the webinar. This webinar will also be recorded and we will make the recording available to you after the webinar on the SPP Clearinghouse YouTube channel. During this webinar, we will first hear from Farid Yaker from UN Environment, who will give us an overview of the 10YFP Sustainable Public Procurement Programme and also of the Global Review report. And then we will hear from Aure Adell from Ecoinstitut and Anastasia O'Rourke from Industrial Economics, who will walk us through some of the main findings of this upcoming report. So without further delay, I would like to give the floor to Farid Yaker, Programme Officer in charge of the SPP Programme at UN Environment.
Thank you, Laura. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So this global review is undertaken in 2016 in the framework of the 10YFP program. So a little bit of background on the 10YFP program. So actually it's a framework, 10-year framework of programs for sustainable consumption and production patterns. It is one of the main outcomes of the Rio +20 conference, and its aim is really to accelerate the shift towards SCP patterns in both developed and developing countries. It has some tools to support capacity building and provide technical and financial assistance to developing countries, but it aims also at encouraging innovation and cooperation among all countries and stakeholders. So it's really the main effort of the international community to promote and switch to sustainable consumption and production patterns. Sorry. So within this framework, we have also one of the 6 programs that were adopted in Rio in 2012 was about sustainable public procurement, and UNEP is leading, UN Environment is leading this SPP program together with ICLE and KT, who are co-leading the program. The objective of the program is really to work together to enhance synergies to accelerate the shift towards sustainable public procurement. So we really want to build the case for SPP, show that it can be an effective tool to promote green economy and sustainable development, but also we provide support for implementation on the ground through better access to capacity building resources and by improving coordination between SPP stakeholders. Right now in the program there are 103 partner organizations, there are 10 individual experts. As you can see from the slide, there is a very good international distribution of the partners, but also organizational distribution. We have a variety of organizations from governments, IGOs, NGOs, even individual experts who are represented in the program. In terms of activities, we have core activities, mainly on communication and outreach. So webinars like the one we're organizing right now, but also every 3 months we publish an SPP newsletter. You have the link there. And we are also contributing strongly to the Sustainable Consumption and Production Clearinghouse, which is an online platform dedicated to advancing SCP worldwide, where you can find online resources, you can find recent publications, webinars, new partners and news about SCP events. So I invite you to join the SCP Clearinghouse, and you find the address here online. In terms of work plan and activities, substantive activities undertaken by the program, we have 4 core areas. The first one is, and the most important one for us, is really support to implementation of SPP on the ground by providing capacity building, by providing resources, help desks, etc. to foster SPP implementation. We then have a work area on assessing implementation and impact. So we try really to monitor SPP implementation, to provide a framework for that, but also to assess how we can better measure the impacts. It's hard to know right now what are the real impacts of SPP in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of creation of green jobs. So we really need to improve our methods and our frameworks for that. Also trying to promote and have a better sharing of best practices. And I will come back to that, the measurement of SDG 12.7 indicator. We also try to come up with innovative solutions to improve the performance of sustainable procurement, for example, by promoting life cycle costing, by ensuring better access of SMEs to SPP, promoting gender equality in SPP. And finally, collaboration with the private sector is a key work area, and we do it in the framework of a group on sustainable standards with IZL Alliance, by also working on the sustainability of supply chains, and also by promoting resource-efficient business models and circular economy, like the publication we did with the Ministry of Infrastructure of Netherlands and US EPA on product service systems. So all the groups lead to concrete outcomes and publications with key recommendations. So you will be able also to access those documents online. For your information, and well, this is all the links I'm sure will be shared with you, and all these publications are available on our website. As you can see, bottom right of the slide, one of the key publications for us is the Global Review. So we undertook the first one was released in 2013, and we're now discussing this second edition, which is the 2016 Global Review. So the 2013 Global Review was undertaken was commissioned and initiated by UN Environment. So it is a global report to periodically review the implementation of SPP. So here is the link for the initial one. Why do we think it's important to undertake this exercise every 3-4 years? Because we felt there was a need for a global overview of the progress made on SPP at international and national levels, and we needed to analyze both the policies and practice and the provision, and we needed to provide insight into SPP practices from world regions that are not typically covered by the literature. This is also a key objective for us. For example, Latin America, Africa, Asia are less covered in the literature, and through this global review we managed to reach out to these countries and really get a feel of where they stand on SPP implementation. We also we are also responding to a strong demand from SPP stakeholders who have requested for a long time reliable and up-to-date information on activities and organizations involved in SPP. We also want to develop an approach that can be replicated in future global reviews. So there's this interest in having a robust methodology that we're slowly putting in place to track SPP progress and trends over time. And also we are initiating discussions on the creation of a set of objectives and common indicators for SPP, also working on reporting on progress made by national governments using data provided and validated by government themselves. All that is very relevant for SDG 12.7, which is targeting SPP, and the work we do should help us measure progress towards the achievement of 12.7. We also want to expand our understanding of the drivers, barriers, needs, and expectations for SPP. And this is done by including stakeholder opinions gathered through surveys and expert interviews. And also, we want to illustrate the range of SPP and SPP activities by highlighting good practices, examples from a variety of organizations from around the world. The idea is also to raise awareness among stakeholders about existing initiatives and resources, such as the working groups that operate in the 10 YFP that I just presented. And finally, we believe it's important to engage and expand the community of people and organizations that are working on SPP and on related topics such as sustainable supply chain, sustainable sourcing, sustainable production and consumption. So a lot of good reasons really to undertake this work that started in 2013. So the 2016 Global Review is a collective effort. We have, first of all, and I have to thank all the authors, and two of them will speak today, that have been really instrumental to achieve good quality for this work and to lead us to this 2016 Global Review. So we have colleagues from Ecoinstitut, we have industrial economics and Reef Consulting that took part in this work. And all the work was commissioned by UN Environment, and the work was achieved under the guidance and the review of the coordination desk of the 10 YFP. And you have the names there of the people that from these three organizations that provided this guidance and coordinated the work. In terms of methodology, you can see the main steps that were taken to develop the work. So first of all, we performed a literature review and analyzed 70 sources published between 2012 and 2015 on SPP. We also conducted 6 in-depth semi-structured interviews with experts in sustainable public procurement from different world regions. We developed a questionnaire to gather data on sustainable public procurement, and it was sent to 56 countries, and 41 ultimately participated. And we also developed 4 best practice examples that were complied, and also a survey was conducted between May and June 2016, and 200 participants from a broad range of stakeholders completed the survey, and they also came from a variety of world regions and types of organizations. In terms of geographical distribution, as you can see on the slide, the participation in the survey and questionnaires reflect the level of implementation, well, the state of implementation of SPP at world level, but also the interest for SPP. So in terms of implementation, of course, we have strong participation from Europe, from North America, but the interest is reflected by the strong participation of Asia and Latin America. Africa lags behind because we know that it is not still at the top priority of policymakers in Africa, but we can see that there is also a growing interest in this continent. So after this introduction, I think we're now ready to really move to the substantive and the main part of the report. And we will start with Aure, who will present the analysis we did on the implementation of SPP in national governments. Aure, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, and thank you Farid for the introduction. As Farid mentioned, we were in charge of mostly the part of the report on looking at how national governments are implementing and supporting sustainable public procurement. So we tried to really identify the policy framework supporting sustainable public procurement, the type of implementation activities that they have in place, and also the monitoring approaches that they implement to really track progress on the topic. Most of the information was about what the national governments themselves are doing to promote SPP, both internally and also externally, because sometimes the policies cover other levels of public sectors and the activities are not only targeted to their own organizations but the lower range. But it was all the initiatives conducted by the national governments. So on the first part of what is the policy framework supporting sustainable public procurement, we try to see if sustainable procurement is included in overarching or thematic policies, like for example, national sustainable consumption and production policies or sustainable development policies, also climate protection policies, etc. And we saw that almost all of them had included sustainable or procurement provisions within those sustainability policies, 93%. We also asked them if they were including sustainability in their procurement regulations, and a lot of them did. From the ones that are participated, of course, then we have all the others that didn't participate in the questionnaire and in the research, but the ones that responded, most of them do specify in their procurement regulations the importance of supporting sustainability objectives within the regulations, and some of them how they can do it in practice. And then we move forward to if they actually had dedicated sustainable procurement policies, and more than half of them really did. And those that didn't, from the ones that answered that they were developing their policies and action plans. So we really see a strong policy support to sustainable public procurement, to the inclusion of sustainability in their policies. Next. Next, please. If we look at only how sustainability or sustainable public procurement is included in overarching and thematic policies, we see that 61% were including SPP in environmental policies, about 34% in socio-economic policies, so more related to poverty or inclusion of risk groups, etc., and 32% in sustainable development strategies. Compared to 2013, even though the group of countries that answer are not exactly the same and the methodology was a bit different, we can say that the inclusion of SPP has increased in all policy arenas, both overarching and thematic, as well as in the regulatory and framework. And what we see is what we can see is a new trend in looking to sustainable public procurement as more strategic, and therefore embedding public procurement in all types of sustainability-related policies. Next. When we look only at the policies, at the specific sustainable public procurement policies, the dedicated ones, we see that the nature of those policies vary largely. Some of them are single aspect regulations, or really, for example, focusing on procuring from veterans, or procuring recycled products, or procuring energy efficient products. So some of them are really specific, but some others are really comprehensive. So they cover a lot of aspects, both environmental and social. And yes, not all of them have those overarching, but when they do, they cover different sustainability aspects. Next. When looking at those SPP policies, we still see that environment has still a leading role, or more prominent role in SPP. 74% of the policies cover both aspects, social and environmental. 26% focus only on environmental issues, and none of the countries were focusing only on social. So either they focus on both, or they focus on environmental issues. So environment is still more prominent, especially in Asia and in some European countries. We see that they were only focusing on environmental issues. but the others cover a wide range of, or the most cover a wide range of issues. And we can see them in the next slide. We ask governments to indicate with sustainability issues they try to address with their sustainable public procurement policies, and we rank them based on the number of countries that answer if they were covering or not. So the green ones are the environmental issues, the yellow ones or orange are the social environmental issues. So as we can see, most of them focus on resource efficiency, the exclusion of hazardous substances, energy conservation, climate change mitigation, waste minimization, and the social aspects come a bit later, focusing on diversity and equality, the promotion of SMEs, and local environmental conditions, health, occupational aspects, and then the ones continue down. So we can see that many of them focus or try to focus on key issues like resources efficiency when it comes to environment, and diversity and equality when it comes to social, and the rest are less prominent. Next. We then ask them what aspects or what activities are being promoted in for sustainable public procurement. We cannot see it very well in the slides. The names of each column are a bit cramped, but the first three are about the definition of sustainable public procurement criteria, the development of guidelines, and the provision of training. So most of them are strongly providing resources and support to practitioners on how to implement sustainable public procurement. Also the ones that are more advanced, they are continuing producing the guidelines, training, and recommendations. Then it was followed by the integration of sustainability or sustainable public procurement in procurement tools and guidelines and internal procedures and regulations, about 50%. But in those cases, all of them mentioned that it wasn't that broadly implemented. So a few instruments did include those, a few departments did, but not the whole national government. So it's something that came more strongly than compared to 2013, but it's not overall or implemented very broadly. Follows this, it's networking and reputational incentives, awards, and publication of results online. And then there's the economic incentives with only 4 governments implementing those, and other activities that didn't fall on those categories, like, for example, partnerships between public authorities and the private sector to promote eco-innovations and other kind of arrangements. So we really see strong support to guidelines and resource provision, slowly introducing more SPP into procurement procedures and tools, and then the other support activities that, not because they are less implemented doesn't mean that are less effective, but are less mentioned by national governments. Next. We also asked if they were prioritizing some products, services, or works when defining those guidelines or in the policies. And we can see that there's still a strong prioritization of product categories. Many of them, like the first one we see, office IT, office paper, vehicles, cleaning, furniture, these are often contracted in governments centrally. So that's why it also makes sense to focus on those, and also because it's regular use by all type of public authorities for the regular operations, followed by building design and constructions, equipment and material, and then the other energy, textiles, food, and then another long range of products. Here we just put the most mentioned in the question. Here a shift. Priority categories were or are promoted or selected in governments that are starting mostly. The more the government has been implementing sustainable public procurement and producing guidelines, the more widespread it is between or among practitioners, and the more there's a need to cover all types of procurement activities and products. So we really see in the policies a change from some priority product groups to more implementing sustainable criteria in all types of procurement, focusing more on strategic issues like climate change or circular economy. So not so much on the product specifics, but on the objectives that want to be achieved, and then practitioners are taught and provided resources to implement it in all kinds of procurements. Next. And the last thing that we ask after the policies and the implementation activities were to see if SPP is being monitored. Monitor is important because it allows policymakers to make better informed decisions, also to managers to improve program efficiency and implementation. And of course, if you communicate it either internally or also externally, it demonstrates political commitment and transparency. So we asked them if they were monitoring SPP, and 66% of the national governments that participated in the study do monitor the implementation of sustainable public procurement. This, as I mentioned before, it cannot be totally compared to the results of 2013, but we can see a trend of higher monitoring, an increase in the monitoring of sustainable public procurement, especially in those governments that have a longer trajectory. So we saw less monitoring in Latin America or in Asia, but also it's because their adoption of dedicated SPP policies or objectives has come later. From those that monitor, 85% have dedicated SPP policies. So really having a policy only to promote sustainable public procurement helps in defining also the monitoring system and to report on achievements. And 74% have specific SPP targets, either on the SPP policies or in overarching policies. So we could say that if you have a target fixed and any kind of level of policy, and if you have a dedicated SPP policy, it really helps or encourages governments to monitor and report on results. Next. When monitoring SPP, we saw three kind of elements that can be monitored. Either the institutionalization of SPP, so kind of the process, if the staff is being trained, if SPP obligations or objectives are included in performance reviews of staff, all this kind of more process kind of implementation. It can also be monitored by seeing if the procurement activities are actually introducing environmental or social criteria, so more the outputs. That can be either tenders, if the tenders include the environmental or social criteria, if the products that are being purchased are really more sustainable. Also, some others monitor if they are purchasing or contracting preferred companies, and by preferred companies that can be defined very differently from country to country. It can be SMEs, it can be protected, veterans, female only, etc., Aboriginal, depending on the policy priorities in each country. And then they can also monitor or calculate, evaluate the outcomes, so the environmental and social benefits that are being achieved by implementing sustainability criteria in the procurement decisions. From the countries that monitor, from those 66% countries that monitor, 1/3 monitor SPP institutionalization. Most of the rest, about 98%, monitor outputs in one way or another, either tenders. Tender is more used in Europe and North America. Sustainable products, the actual purchase of products, also in the US and especially in Asian countries. And then the outcomes, the benefits, only 1/3 of the governments that monitor estimate the environmental or social impacts. Next. This can be because on the one hand, the process-related indicators are kind of easy to gather and data is readily available. So if you are developing criteria, if you are implementing or including SPP in your procedures in your software, then outputs, it's because normally the objectives that policies have defined are based on level of green procurement. So that's why they are trying to calculate that. The indicators are very different depending on the objectives. The way they monitor, the way they define green is also different. So we cannot aggregate, so at the moment, the level and compare countries to countries because they really define green very differently. They focus on different product categories, etc. So it cannot be compared. But most of them calculate that, and we might see an increase as electronic procurement systems become the norm, that it's going to be easier to track which of those procurement or purchases are green or social. And we saw an increase compared to 2013 of the government's monitoring outputs. And when it comes to estimating or calculating the sustainability benefits of SPP, it is still a challenge because you have to use proxy data and average and approximation and extrapolations, and also kind of defining the impact of a green product compared to a non-green. What is the standard of the green? What is the standard of the conventional or non-green, or if you consider social aspects the same. So there's still a bit of lack of data, difficulty in the calculations, and not all of them are, as we saw, only a third of those that monitor actually try to calculate the benefits to communicate why SPP is important, but then all the results are a bit difficult or not so sound or solid. And when they calculate the sustainability benefits, most of them do it in terms of environmental benefits, and from that greenhouse gases reduction. Really, 4 of the countries that monitor the benefits mention that, the other water or energy less. For the social is job creation, that was estimated by 2 of the countries, and then hours worked by protected workers, of number of people benefiting of the sustainable criteria. And then in economic terms, the 2 governments mention also that they estimate cost savings, most of the time linked to energy savings. So kind of link the 2 together, and economic benefits in general were also mentioned by another government. So we can see still the lack of the range of calculation of the sustainability benefits and the priorities that are out there on climate change and job creations, cost savings. So that's why also it's the indicators that are most often calculated. So that's a bit the highlights for the part on how or what are national governments doing to implement and promote sustainable public procurement in their governments. The next section is going to be on the more general review of trends and barriers from stakeholders. So I'll give the floor to Anastasia. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And if you...
Thank you, Aure. Yes, we're ready to move to the presentation of the global trends, which will be and mainly the findings of the trends in sustainable public procurement. And this will be presented by Anastasia O'Rourke from Industrial Economics. And I forgot to mention earlier that Anastasia was the lead author of the 2013 study, together with Charlotte Lehre from Sweden. The floor is yours, Anastasia.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Anastasia O'Rourke. I'm joining you here today from the US, and it's my pleasure to be here and share with some results from our survey. The section of our report was really a broader group than national governments. So we just heard from Aure quite a lot about what those 41 national governments are doing on SPP. This is a broader group. Sustainable purchasing is it's being practiced by companies, by large non-profits, by international organizations, including the UN. And there's a lot of interest in this as those organizations of all types are sort of realizing that a lot of their impacts are really happening down in their supply chains. And one of the ways to address that is to look at what they are buying in the purchasing process. So as Farid mentioned up front, we did do an online survey and we had about 201 respondents. from 52 countries. So it was a really widely, wide geographic participation. We had a range of organizations, from governments to NGOs to international organizations to private sector people participating. And here we were asking them about SPP, as in sustainable public procurement, as well as sustainable procurement in their organization, no matter what type of organization. So just to keep that in mind, that people are talking about the sustainable purchasing writ large, not only in as practiced by governments. So now for some results on the screen. You can see some of the drivers for SPP and sustainable purchasing. The drivers most often selected by participants all suggest a kind of a top-down approach to implementation, or at least that's really what's driving things. So as we heard all about the policies and the rules, mandatory rules and legislation from Aure in the national governments, that seems to be playing out in other organisations as well. Yeah, that's perhaps not surprising, but we do see some other drivers as well, with increasing sort of training of procurement staff in SPP or in SP, growing expertise in doing this work, and importantly, the availability of good solid criteria and specifications that really enable people to be able to do this. Quite a lot of drivers mentioned in terms of just individuals' personal commitment to sustainability by staff, whether that's a policy person or a sustainability or a CSR person in a company, or within the procurement division or purchasing department itself. And then finally, some drivers around monitoring and evaluation that's sort of making organizations do more and more of this important work. Next slide. When we look at the type of activities that people are undertaking under the umbrella of SPP, most people are defining this as buying more sustainable products or services, or procuring more sustainable buildings or facilities. So really what they buy, and trying to do that with different product specifications or service specifications for being more sustainable one way or another. In addition, we're seeing some growth in sort of more strategic approaches being taken. So looking from one thing at, on that fourth one there, procuring from companies with more sustainable operations. So looking not only at what you buy, but who you buy from. And this is where we start to get into the area of, for example, are you buying from small and medium enterprises, or are you buying from local organizations to yours? Are you buying from ones that have some sort of sustainability plan or operations or better practices in what they're doing? In addition, we're seeing some increases compared to 2013, at least, in people thinking a bit more holistically about purchasing. So thinking like going back in a procurement cycle to looking at really at the definition of needs to procure in the first place. Can they reduce that, the throughput of products and services that they're buying? In some cases purchasing less, or in some cases buying secondhand, finding different alternatives. So really thinking along the lines of that reduce, reuse, recycle kind of idea, and starting to implement that in terms of procurement, which really changes, changes what the end impact is of this procurement as well. There's also some work on supplier engagement. So, once you have it, it's not just about choosing a more sustainable product, service, or supplier, but really once you have a supplier in place, is actually engaging those suppliers and developing them on their sustainability capabilities, and encourage them to take actions in that regard. And as I said, buying more from local suppliers and is rising up as an activity. And then just generally gathering information on sustainability performance from suppliers. A lot of people surveys or using existing information from suppliers through various platforms that they're providing. So quite a lot of activity there. So all in, I mean, we do see some shift around here of what's considered sustainable purchasing or SPP, and you know, it's spread around the world. There's no single sort of activity that's really in one particular region. It's quite diverse. Thank you. Next slide. So some of the topics and strategies and activities that we see rising. So we actually asked survey participants what sustainable procurement related topic, strategies, activities are becoming more prominent in your organization. And Ecolabels standards and certifications was the most frequently chosen topic. And this is especially by national government representatives. So this makes sense, we think, because organizations, you know, national governments, but also other organizations are really looking for credible and meaningful sustainability standards for their buyers, and really relying on those Ecolabels and standards and certifications to provide that definition of what is the more sustainable option, what is the greener option in whatever product or service category they're buying in. And then we did see a rise in people are saying that monitoring and reporting of SPP implementation is growing in prominence, as well as meeting climate change goals. So there are some topics that are sort of on the agenda and rising up. Life cycle costing tools, so this interest of seeing and being able to calculate the cost of a product or the cost of a service through its full life cycle, not just the upfront cost. And that's rising in importance, and as are e-procurement platforms, which are, you know, really being adopted more and more by purchasers, and can be really used to facilitate sustainable purchasing. If you know, it's tricky to do so, but it can be done, and it certainly helps the monitoring aspect of trying to track then what you've done as a sustainable purchasing activity. So next slide. Just on the Ecolabel standards and certifications, we were asking, you know, how do stakeholders mostly use them within purchasing, and here you can see that they're mainly being used as reference tools and to verify claims, and then more and more as mandatory requirements. And this has actually grown since 2013, that mandatory requirements are coming into force, and they're specifying particular eco-labels and standards and certifications as a way of doing that. So that's quite interesting especially for those working in those eco-label standard certification world, and to know that this is really a helpful tool for many purchasers. So next slide. Let's look at some of the main barriers now. So some of the problems that people are experiencing. Similar to 2013, we found that the top sort of barrier selected was that this perception that sustainable products and services are more expensive. And then this year we found that the lack of expertise on SPP implementation or SP implementation was similarly a barrier. And that in many organizations, the sort of lack of a policy commitment or a goal or an action plan was holding things back. So we saw that, you know, this is one of the strongest drivers that people felt was important to getting sustainable purchasing going, and same with leadership and mandatory rules. But the lack of it, conversely, is problematic, and especially for non-government, meaning private sector or non-profit organizations, you know, there is a real need to develop and this sort of top-down leadership on this topic. We think that the lack of expertise in SPP or SP implementation, that actually came up a bunch of times for national governments as well. And you know, clearly, there's, even if you have the policy in place, you still need the people there to implement, and it is a complex thing to do within procurement systems as large and established and complicated, frankly, as a lot of national governments have. So this real expertise in both procurement and in sustainability seems to be a barrier. And if we can go to the next slide. We do think that the good news is there's several possible solutions to dealing with these problems and barriers. So with that one on lack of expertise, I think you know, we can do training and lesson sharing through programs like the 10YFP SPP program to really bring up the capacity and bring up the expertise from the community that we're in, and share best practices with each other on really how to do this and how to do this well. And there is a lot of that going on. So you know, we have a good infrastructure and a great community now, and in all parts of the world. So there's a lot of resources out there, and so I feel quite that this lack of expertise problem is going to, you know, be solvable over time. Similarly, this lagging perception that sustainable products are too expensive or more expensive can somewhat be mitigated by using tools such as life cycle costing. But I think also just over time, as the market develops, you know, costs will come down because of scale. So this will sort of transfer over time, and certainly stimulating the market with SPP sort of requirements will help to do that. On that very last barrier on the left, the competing procurement priorities, this one is trickier, especially in many parts of the world to tackle, because, you know, there's a lot of pressure on procurement organizations and a lot of actual changes happening in many of them, and the way procurement is undertaken. And so, you know, integrating sustainability into that is hard, but we do think that as procurement and purchasing functions get sort of modernized and evolve over time, especially with e-procurement platforms, but also just in how these processes are run and the people involved in that, that opens the door actually for sustainability to come in as those systems are evolving. And I just want to point out that this is a worldwide phenomenon. This is not, you know, this is where I sit in the US. This is certainly the case, that these big procurement systems of governments in particular are really changing right now. They're going much more towards category management and strategic acquisition, which actually really opens up the opportunity to put in place some great sustainability policies and requirements and make sure they're really being implemented. So we do, however, as a community, still need to make the business case for SPP and the economic case for sustainable purchasing, and continue to gather the evidence and the case studies and the best practices in order to facilitate that. So next slide, and this is my last slide for this trends section, and then we're happy to take questions at the end. So we did in 2013, we asked stakeholders whether they expected their national governments to do more SPP in the coming 5 years. And in 2013, 84% of the survey participants said that they expected it would grow more or substantially more. So we were kind of interested to see in 2016 if those expectations had been met. And many actually confirmed that, in fact, sustainable purchasing and SPP has become more important or much more important in their regions. And this particularly was the case in Central America and the Caribbean and in South America, where in that time period there was a sharp rise in the sort of importance of SPP in their organizations since 2012. Participants generally had a higher expectation for an increase in SPP in their own organisations than from their national governments, which was interesting. And this was across all regions, really. I think in Europe we found that some people had higher expectations for their national governments than their own organisations, but in general across the whole group it seemed to be that they were you know, not sure what was happening at the national government level, or you know, just expected that change would happen more quickly in their own organisations. This is obviously, you know, really contingent on what's happening in those different countries, the results of certain elections in different countries, how that would all play into the policy arena. So I think that this suggests that despite sort of changing political environments in this time, organisations are sort of getting on with it and continuing their work on sustainable purchasing. In general, we heard that stakeholders are also expecting that sustainable purchasing will become more widespread in the next 5 years. And so we look forward to learning what everyone is working on when we do another global review in a few years' time. So with that, I am going to hand the floor back to Farid, and I just want to thank you all for listening today, and also to many of you who probably participated in this study one way or another. So Farid, back to you in Paris.
Thank you, Anastasia. Yeah, we're now ready to move to the conclusions that we can draw from the study. So, as you just said, Anastasia, and also highlighted Aure, the 2016 Global Review really highlights how SPP is becoming a widespread, and I can say a standard practice for many actors. And we can say that really good procurement is becoming sustainable procurement. SP activities are on the rise in all types of organizations, local governments, non-profits and private sector companies, both large and small. We noted, however, that successful SPP requires a solid policy foundation, top-level leadership support and excellence in implementation, and also that considerable work still needs to be done before sustainability considerations become regular criteria within bid specifications and contracts. We also noted that some national governments are shifting their SPP policies towards strategic procurement policies. So strategic is really becoming the key word, and there is a major conference actually at OECD on 2nd June on sustainable strategic procurement. And sustainability is only one of several pillars or goals of this strategic thinking that can also address in priority economic benefits, also innovation, and maybe support to local economy, etc. SPP goes beyond picking greener products. It's really, it encompasses activities that ranges from all the steps of the procurement cycle, from needs definition to contract management. So it's not just about picking greener product, it has a strong social component also. SDG and Target 12.7 provide an opportunity to formulate a more standard definition and articulation of SPP practices and measures that will help in measuring progress and encourage adoption. So since 2013, we have adopted the SDGs in 2015, and the fact that there is a specific SPP target will be a strong encouragement for governments and all players to shift towards sustainable purchasing. And finally, transforming sustainable production and consumption patterns will require collaboration among all stakeholders along the supply chain. Of course, this is also something that is obviously important, but it is also highlighted by the study. In the next global review, 2019, we expect to see more participants and more standardized approaches to implementing SPP as the sector will become more mature and organizations will improve their monitoring, measurement and reporting practices. We also probably will see an increased emphasis on supplier engagement, also higher engagement of the public and private sectors. The supply chain and value chain thinking is becoming prominent, and we understand that all players on the value chains need to contribute so that we can really shift to sustainable consumption and production. And we expect to have more cross-sector exchanges of ideas and approaches, especially between the private and the public sector. And we will end on inviting you to visit the website, the SCP Clearinghouse, and also you have there the link to the latest newsletter of the 10YFP. We will have the study will be, the report should be available in early May, and you will all be informed by email. And I would like to finish by thanking all those that really contributed to this achievement, mainly the authors, the members of the coordination desk, but also all the government officials, SPP experts, representatives from academia, private sector, and NGOs who contributed to this collective effort. Thank you very much. And now we are ready to read aloud your questions. And so far we have, I think, 2 questions, but you're encouraged to send questions, and we will address them. So far, we have a question from Giancarlo, who is asking Aure actually, dear Aure, inside the category cleaning, what types of products are included? For example, hand soap. Aure, you're unmuted.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the question. And we only asked for the category. We didn't go into the details of what included each one of them. For example, for office IT, we didn't ask if it was computers, printers, servers. We really made it broad so that all of them could kind of enter in one of the categories. So for cleaning, we didn't see exactly which type of products or practices, services they include within that one. So we don't have the detail. We didn't go into that.
Thank you, Aure. We have a question from Lauren. I think it's for Anastasia, since it covers the global trends in SPP. And Lauren is asking, are there separate data available on strongest drivers only covering public procurement? For example, excluding responses from private and NGO sector. So really the question is about trends targeting or covering or concerning only public procurement.
Yes, so we do have that, and that'll be in the report. So we did, break this out by type of organization as well as by region. So that's sort of included in there. And if we're talking about the drivers in particular, we did see that across all types of organizations, so government and non-government, that the policy, the existence of a policy or a goal or an action plan and strong leadership and or even mandatory rules really were the strongest drivers. And so you can imagine in large government organizations that was also the case, and it was.
Yeah, so,
and yeah, that's all broken out in the report.
Okay. Maybe we can unmute Lorraine. She wants to follow up on this. Since Lorraine has also. Lorraine, if you want to follow up, or if you want to ask your second question.
No, thank you very much. That's answered my question. I will be happy to look into the report. Thank you. Okay,
good. Thanks. Then there's a second question from you on Ecolabels.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering when you talked about Ecolabels, and obviously Ecolabels are quite significant and increasingly used as as a reference guideline probably in public procurement. But it was also mentioned that Ecolabels are used as a mandatory requirement in tenders, I suppose. And I guess we all know that there's always the tricky balance that needs to be kept in terms of supplier discrimination and equal treatment when asking for Ecolabels as a mandatory requirement. So I was wondering if there are any more details available in which regions this is used as a mandatory requirement, and how those public authorities are managing this tricky balance.
Yeah, thank you. I can't give you those details right on the fly. I would need to look it up exactly, but I can say that it does vary by region. So in Europe, there are some specific European directives which make it harder to mandate specific ecolabels. Other countries don't have that issue. So in some countries, they are able to do that. They have more latitude in that way. And so really then
well, if I can add, maybe
the Ecolabel, sure.
Yeah, and then Lauren, we also invite you to read a recent publication we did on sustainable procurement and actually green public procurement in Asia. It's a benchmarking study, and in those countries you have mandatory procurement from a list of designated products, and in this case, of course, there's an obligation to use specific eco-labels that are also produced in the country for those specific products. So when you have mandatory procurement of goods, then you have an association with specific eco-labels. But it's true that it's mostly in Europe that we have these regulations that also prevent us from full use of eco-labels because of discrimination issues and so on and so forth. Aure, do you want to add something on this topic?
Mm-hmm. No, I think you covered, but I also just reminding that the results in the survey, they focus from the public to the private sector. So some of the answers on that specific question might come more from the private, but of course it really depends on the legal framework. So as Farid said, in Asia a lot demand the national eco-labels, so they don't have any barriers or provided some guidelines on and prioritize some eco-labels. So I think we in Europe we are a bit more strict regarding that, even though the new directives are being a bit more flexible on that point, but we'll have to see that. We might see a change in the next review. Yeah, and just in general, before if there's another question coming up, apart from the global review, from the report where all the aggregated results will be presented for the national government, there will be also one fact sheet for each of the national governments that participated in the study, except one. So you will also see in more detail the polling SPP, the type of activities, the other activities that we didn't go into the detail, but explain a bit more the kind of results they have. So you will have a lot of information, detailed information for each single national government, apart from the aggregated results.
Yeah, thanks, Aure, for mentioning that. I mean, that's one significant addition compared to the 2013 review, the fact that now we have 40 or 41 fact sheets per government, and that's an opportunity to thank also those governments that took part in this work. We have a question from Vera. So Vera, if you want to ask your question, we haven't muted you.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for the seminar. Actually, I think the question is pretty simple, but I still just want to clear the terminology. We talk about sustainable public procurement that includes the big story about the green instrument. should we get it like that green public procurement is a part of sustainable public procurement? Just to be clear on the terminology, because in the literature we can say it both. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Aure, Anastasia, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I can answer. Yeah, when we talk about sustainable public procurement, we included there the environmental dimensions and the socio-economic dimensions. We left out all that is more kind of, in a way, economic or more typical procurement, so transparency, anti-corruption, correct procedures, etc., etc. We kind of left it out as this is the basis for a good procurement system, and then the sustainability, we were focusing more on the environmental and social, so we included the green part within the definition, and we asked for the national government parts to identify with sustainability issues they were considering, and it's the long graphic that we saw before with resource efficiency, natural climate change, gender equality, SMEs. That's kind of the topics we were including. So both.
Thanks, Aure.
Okay, thank you.
And thanks, Vera. Kenny, if you want to ask your question loud, we can give you the floor. Otherwise, we'll read it. Kenny? No. Okay. So Kenny is asking, how have other colleagues generated senior management interest and awareness if there is little top-down mandate regarding the incorporation of sustainability in procurement priorities? Is the question clear, or you want me to rephrase it? It's about.
I think if I can, it's how do you actually get the top level support if that's not happening?
Yeah.
Well, we did not study that directly in this report, but there are a lot of different case studies and best practices that are on the SPP clearinghouse that cover some of these issues, as well as, we have a few case studies in the report as well. Oftentimes, what I see happening is people taking on a smaller SPP project and really delivering results on it and communicating those results well, and then from there showing what can be done. Another mechanism would be to compare, to look at other organizations that that are comparable in some way or interesting in some way to the top level management, and saying, look, this is what they're doing. This is how we could do it too. So that sort of benchmarking is often very useful. So they're just a couple of ideas. But Aure, Farid, what are you seeing on how people manage to get the interest of?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. What we've seen from the public authorities we work with, not the private sector, but I would guess it can be equivalent, is to really start with something small that nobody is going to discuss a lot, have good results, not risk everything, to really be sure of what you are doing, have good results, and then communicate that and present that to your top levels. And it takes some time. So you can start from a small department, then you get your boss kind of on board, and then you continue, and then you might affect other departments, and in the end it comes to the top level. But I think that there's no magic formula for that, but really if you do something and can demonstrate success, then it's a way to convince the top level. And as Anastasia mentioned, also presenting others similar to you that are doing it more sustainably, and presenting the benefits and the results and the lack of risk and the opportunities, so that you can really convince. And if you have other policies around, it doesn't have to be on sustainable procurement, but if you have a policy on climate change, or a policy on whatever policy, because in the end with procurement we can affect most of or contribute to most of the sustainability development policies of a government or organization, try to show the link of your sustainable procurement activity to those policies and the support to those policies. It's also a way to kind of convince at top level to go for it.
Yes, thank you, Aure. I also wanted to stress the need to have a global policy framework, and when there's a country commitment towards sustainability, actually included in levels as high as the Constitution or Sustainable Development Strategies or SCP strategies, I think this helps to really mobilize decision makers and well, top management from organizations. Now we have a question from Justina. Justina, if you want to ask your question.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. It's been very, very directed and useful. I just wanted to know how many governments were used in this analysis, and were they cross-cutting regionally? So did you, for instance, approach just 5 in Europe and then 10 in the Americas and 4 in Asia, or was it, consistently cross-cutting? Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer to that. First, we really wanted, because of the experience in 2012, where there was a survey and different people could answer from different departments from the same government, and there was a problem in consistency on the answers. This time we really tried to identify a focal point, a person that would be in charge of providing the information and coordinate internally for a kind of official answer from the government. So for that we had to identify those focal points. We reached out to the different contacts that UN Environment had on the 10 YFP and other channels related to sustainable consumption and production. We also reached the governments in Europe through the European Commission, the advisory group they have there, and then other contacts that either the coordinations desk, so UN Environment, KT or Eclay had from national governments. It was also sent a message through the 10 YFP communication mailing list to identify responsibles from the different governments. So based on the interest, the ones that provided an answer, we gathered this focal point person and then an alternate that could reply in case the focal point was not available or was busy. We really tried to cover all the governments, but of course, as I'm mentioning, in Africa, not so many governments are involved in sustainable consumption and production just alone, and in SPP even less. So the number of countries that we reached was a bit lower. A few replied, but then very few replied to be contacted. But when we send around the questionnaire with all the information to be provided, many of them either didn't answer or just say that they didn't have much. But at least they answered, they provided some responses, but we didn't select a few from each region. We really tried to have as many as possible. We identified with focal points 56, and then we only got replies from 41. And from those 41, one asked not to be published the fact sheet, so there's the fact sheets are for the other 40. So we really try to reach as much as possible, but we got the answers we got. And for example, 2 governments that it doesn't affect only the ones that don't have SPP, but for example, in Europe, the UK didn't answer, which is a big one, and they are doing a lot of things, but for whatever reasons, timing or change of responsibilities, for whatever reason, they didn't provide a reply. Or from Latin America, Costa Rica is also doing a lot and couldn't participate in the study. So we missed a lot, or it represents the ones that are more advanced, but also because the ones that don't have much, when they saw the questionnaire, say, well, we don't have anything of this, so we provide no answer. I hope it helps to clarify the scope.
I can add to that also that, of course, we tried as much as we can, and we missed a few, but we have a good sample of really those that are active and implementing sustainable procurement. And the good news is that now we have really identified the focal points in the government that are going to help us measure the SDG 12.7.1 indicator, and this can be also considered an achievement of this work, the fact that we have identified the key persons in those governments. And we hope that for the next edition, when this study becomes more really prominent and accepted as the well, what it is, a unique tool to get a global picture, we will have more participation in the next edition. Okay, so we have a question from Hyping. Hyping, you're unmuted. Hyping? Yeah. Yes, you're now really unmuted. Okay, so Hyping is calling from Korea, from the ICLE East Asia Secretariat, and she's asking, when talking about the mindsetting changing and life cycle costing as the solution, could you give more information on the cost-benefit analysis of SPP and what are the tools available or that we found in the report?
We didn't identify specific tools. We more said this idea of life cycle costing is a trend people are interested in doing, methodology, if you like. So we do know that there are a lot of different tools for life cycle costing out there, and available, oftentimes freely available. So I think it's an area where we expect more, and hopefully there will be more use of these tools and these methodologies to help sort of make the case for taking a longer view of costs. So yeah, there's some in the survey, at least it was more at the level that we saw people seeing a trend in more adoption of that sort of tools, and we think that's a positive trend that can help overcome this perception that sustainable products and services can be more expensive in the short term. So Farid or Aure, do you want to add to that? Is there any particular tools you'd like to mention?
From my side, also the national governments, we didn't go into that level of detail, but just because you are at ICLE, in a different project, the SPP regions, we've prepared a report on life cycle costing and the use in procurement, and there's a list of tools, so I can send you the link to that report later, so that you have, but not it didn't come from the Global Review.
Yes, and I can add that CONSIP, the Italian procurement agency, is doing also a review of all the available life cycle costing tools that also I hope will be available to all. Okay, so I think we are now ready to conclude. Since we don't see any more questions, we have thanks from a lot of thanks from many of you who are thanking us for the quality of the webinar, and I guess the quality of the study. I hope so. So as I said, early May, you will be able to access and get the report on the internet. We will send you the link to that. And also we will, of course, upload the presentation on our YouTube channel, right? And we'll send the link also to that. So I wanted to thank my colleagues here, and especially Laura for having prepared this webinar, and also Milice and Claire, and also Aure and Anastasia for their very rich presentations and also their contribution to this webinar, and the teams also from Industrial Economics, Ecoinstitut Barcelona, and our friends from the Team Reef Consultancy, and all those that really took part in this study. Thanks for staying that late with us. We had participation of around 90 people in this webinar, and now I think it's time to conclude and to thank you all for having been part of this webinar. Thank you. À bientôt.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.